for 6 months or a year, whatever it is, your insides are actually killing you and you're falling apart. People would think that it was irresponsible if you do it, but you do it with your emotional illnesses and your mental illnesses. And this is what high functioning is. High functioning is nothing but wearing a social mask. It is masking your symptoms. It is pretending that you are not sick. It's pretending that you're not ill. And at the very least, if you need to pretend, as I needed to in my situation, so I could not put myself in a worse mental, emotional state by making my outside world more chaotic, you at least should be honest about the fact that you are struggling and that you are not well. That way you can open the door for people to help you. And in my situation, I want to tell you guys, because a lot of people find it terrifying and they find it shameful to do this, and I did for years. And the first time that I broke down in front of a close friend, I was terrified that she was going to see me a certain way. Or when it comes to things like self-harm, the whole thing with being Baker acted, right? If you passive ideation, that doesn't happen, but a lot of people can misconstrue this, right? But there's such a threat to making the well-being worse if you were to be honest. So this is where society plays a part in this. But one thing I've learned from stepping up to the courage of being honest about what was going on inside of me, and what to a degree is still going on inside of me, is that you have more help than you think. You have more resources than you think. And when you come from these paradigms, you are so heavily conditioned with the world is dark, the world is not there to help you, the world is against you, the world is going to harm you, the world is not safe. A lot of those things are so deeply ingrained in you that you are terrified and ashamed to step forward into the pack in the authenticity of the darkness that you're going through, and the shame that you're going through, and the inner terror that you go through, whatever it is, right? And when I finally stepped forward and was honest with the people around me, I realized I had more help than I thought. And even people like in my situation, my surviving parent, I always thought that she was cold and did not care about my brother and I. And she genuinely shocked me when I was honest. It took me a very long time, by the way, so I'm not trying to force people to do things they're not ready to do, because with the suicidality thing, I was 30 years old the first time I told my mother that I tried to kill myself when I was 15. And I spent so long hiding things from her and being the high functioning one in my family, because one, I assumed there was no room for me to break down because of the way that my other family members were breaking down and needed certain attention. And two, I was living by myself, so I could not afford to break down. And then the other thing was that I assumed they did not care about me, because as a child, of course, a lot of the time it is our family that causes our suffering. And at the end of the day, relationships are what cause the most of our suffering. When you guys think about it, we can deal with a lot of stuff, but the things that leave us traumatized are relationships, probably 99% of the time, right? But I was very shocked when I was able to come clean to one of the people, my mother, who in my perception traumatized me, thinking that she was cold and didn't care about me. And I had spent years in that paradigm and watched her absolutely weep for me. And somebody who I thought had no guilt and no remorse, because again, she was masking too. There were a lot of things she didn't show because she had to go in that masculine provider role, and the things that she went through shut off her emotions too, or at least it seemed that way on the surface. When I finally came clean to her and I watched her weep and just fall silent, and like some disillusionment was hitting her, and I felt her pain as a mother for me the first time, and I realized it was always there. So, not that everything is perfect between us, and this is an example of what a lot of people go through, because it's the family that causes the most strife, of course. But this actually opened the door for her authenticity, and then my authenticity, and then a door to healing as a family that I did not think was there. And one of the things that causes the downfall in people with mental illness is believing that you are alone in your suffering and that the world doesn't care, like this meme says. And this is a false assumption that is put on by that mask of the high functioning, whatever mental illness you have, right? This high functioning BS is just, I'm lying about my symptoms, I'm masking my symptoms. So you are actually not high functioning. From a spiritual perspective, you're more polarized, right? Which is actually greater suffering, because the more separate you are from yourself and the more separate you are from source, the greater your degree of suffering. This has been proven so many times, energetically, scientifically, whatever, right? So when you're masking, you're actually separating your authentic self from the world more, and you're separating your authentic self from yourself more, which causes polarization, or in psychological circles, they would call this splitting. And the more split you are, the more pain that you are in. So the internal struggle actually feels just as bad, possibly worse, than somebody who is honest about what they're going through or allows themselves to fall apart, right? So holding so tightly to the mask that you're okay is actually causing a lot of your suffering, and it is actually causing a lot of those false paradigms, false thoughts that you guys see in this meme when they said that, hey, nobody cares because you don't present as. But you have to remember, you're the one presenting yourself in society. You know, you're the one presenting yourself through your words, through vulnerability and emotionality, and presenting yourself through your actions. So if you put on that mask, if you get up every day and you decide to cover yourself and cover your mental illness, you're hiding the mental illness. You know what I'm saying? And I'm saying this out of love because I did it for years and it was excruciating. And you're putting, you know, Harry Potter's invisibility cloak over the entirety of yourself, and then going out in the world and you're saying, why doesn't anybody see me? You know, why is nobody asking me how I'm doing? I'm falling apart inside. You know, it's like, well, you covered these symptoms, you know, like you're lying to everybody. You're telling everybody that you're okay. You're pretending you're okay. And then you're getting mad at other people, or, you know, getting upset with the world because they think you're okay. You're presenting yourself as if you are okay. You know, and don't get me wrong, when I have spiritual gifts, I can see right through that a lot of the time. And on a subconscious level, yes, we can all see through this, and there's a social responsibility associated with it. So I'm not trying to attack anybody here, because you treat a problem from both ends, right? It's society's problem and it's your individual problem at the same time, every time. But from the personal perspective, you know, it's your, you know, I'm looking at one of my paintings right now, right? It's like, if I put the painting in the middle of the room, or, you know, whatever, this one right here, right? Like, it's not done. I'll use this as an example, right? It's like, if I have this painting up in my room, and then I take these curtains that I have right there, and I put the curtain over the painting, and then I invite people into the room, and I'm like, why aren't you guys commenting on this awesome painting that I made? Like, why don't you guys see this awesome painting that I made? Like, what is wrong with you? Like, I'm a great artist. Why don't you see it? And it's because I'm covering the very thing I'm trying to get them to see, right? And that's all high functioning is you're covering up what's going on inside. So part of the separation and the loneliness that you feel, or a big part of it really, and again, I understand it because of the hostile environment we've been trained to believe would happen if we come clean about what's going on with us in society. Is not very inviting to want to be vulnerable and honest about these sorts of things, right? But one, you have to internally recognize that you're not alone anyway, and that even though you're masking, plenty of other people around you are masking. In fact, most people are masking, and the people who aren't have just had enough of the masking. You know what I'm saying? Like, they've reached that breaking point of like, okay, I can't mask this, I can't lie about this anymore, this is too much to keep up with, and trying to solve my mental health, right? The only way for high functioning to stop being scary is for you to stop being a high functioning depressive person, to stop being a high functioning anxious person, and just be the anxious or the depressed person that you are authentically in the world, right? Um, and don't get me wrong, I know that's so scary to do, but it's really the only way that you're going to save yourself. And it will get you out of that paradigm of nobody sees me, nobody cares. Because to be alone in the suffering also multiplies the suffering, right? It's not that humans cannot handle suffering, it's that we want to know that there's a solution for the suffering and that there's help and a support system for the suffering. And I have gone through this myself. This is the one thing often that will keep people from wanting to end their own lives or thinking that there's no hope in sight. Because typically when you feel alone, when you feel like nobody cares, and when you feel like there's going to be no end to the suffering, that's when you go to the worst possible solution. When you feel like there is no escape from the suffering, which is a very false paradigm. I've talked to you guys about this in another video I made. That's the moment where the spiritual attack of suicidal thoughts and ending your own life comes into play, because you have to first be gaslit and convinced into thinking that there is no end to the suffering, there is no hope for the suffering, there is no escape, and there is no help, because that's when you feel cornered and you feel like you have no other options. And this high functioning BS that we all do is actually a huge, if not the most contributing factor to that cycle, and that will keep you out of the very bottom and the very worst state of mental illness and emotional illness. And that's when you don't want to be on this planet anymore, right? So if we really want to pull each other out of this hole, you know, people will start being honest about it. And I'm still working on things. I'm not a perfect person. Of course, there are still things that I mask. And even when I'm authentic in making these videos, I'm not as emotional as I want to be. I'm very cerebral because I'm trying to organize my points. So to a degree, there's a layer of emotional masking that I'm still doing even in this authenticity, right? But getting the pieces that you can is a good start. And then on top of that, when you realize that you're never alone anyway, because the systems that we have set up are actually doing this to most people, and this high functioning BS that you're doing is falsely leaving you to believe that it's a you problem or that you're part of some marginalized group, you just might be more consciously aware of it. And if that's not the issue, again, when you come clean, you're commenting on that pink elephant in the room. You know, when you stop masking and you stop being high functioning, what you're actually doing is being the mirror for a society that doesn't want to look at the issue. And you hold up a mirror to the fact that other people are also going through this. Because at the end of the day, the systems and the cultures that we have had in place historically cause this sort of internal suffering. And what emotional illness and mental illness is not an illness at all. It is the genius of the spirit detecting that there is something wrong and something deeply wrong with the systems that we have in place, with the way that we interrelate to each other. And it's good to, we all subconsciously know this, but to say it outright like this does a lot, and it reminds people and it puts it on their conscious mind, not their subconscious mind. And it reminds them to look the problem in the face, right? So there's a lot of courage to it as well. But there is really no such thing as mental illness and emotional illness at the end of the day. It is a mirror that our spirits are holding to each other, and the genius of the spirit telling you, we are not meant to live this way. We are not supposed to do this. And a lot of that anger response, Gabermat talks about this, a lot of that anger response that you feel in suffering this way or not being seen in that suffering is your spirit giving you room to sit in the middle of the mess until people actually choose to stand up and say something and do something. You know what I'm saying? Because if we're all going through this, the people who stop masking are going to be the pioneers and the leaders to say that, you know, first of all, we're going to be honest that this is a problem. We're going to be honest about what's going on inside of us, what's going on inside of you and you and you, right? And we're going to keep putting it in your face, and we're going to keep reminding you until you get up and you do something about it. Because at the end of the day, this is your spirit leading and calling you to say, the way you are feeling inside is not okay. The way you hide it from people is not okay. The way that other people pretend it's not there is not okay. And you sitting here and them sitting here and doing nothing about it is probably the most not okay thing about all of this. So you actually owe it to yourself, and you owe it to other people around you to stop being high functioning, to stop being a liar and a masker, because this is a collective problem. What's happening inside of you is a deeper symptom of what's happening to our entire population. And you can stand as a symbol of, you know, I'm not going to lie to myself. I'm not going to lie to you anymore. We are not going to lie to ourselves anymore, that this is happening internally, and we're going to bring it up to the surface, and we're going to deal with it, you know?